This is my scariest experience of being at home by myself. It happened back when I was 12 years old. It was a long time ago now, but I still remember it really well. During this time, I lived with my parents, older sister, and younger brother. It was very rare that I would be at home by myself, but somehow it happened. It was a Friday evening, and my dad was out of town until the next morning for work. He didn't travel for work a whole lot, but every now and then he did. I remember that my sister was at her best friend's house and was going to be sleeping over there. As for my mom and brother, they were at a birthday party my brother was invited to. I was not invited, and my mom went with my brother because she was basically helping the birthday kid's mom with the party. So that left me home alone, all by myself on a Friday night. My big plans were to just relax and play video games. I was excited about it though, because I rarely got the entire place to myself. Our house was pretty average for the most part. There were 2 levels with all the bedrooms being upstairs. Downstairs was the living room, dining room, and kitchen. So after my mom left that afternoon, shortly after I got back from school, she gave me instructions on how to make a frozen pizza. I had never cooked before, but I loved frozen pizza. At about 7 p.m., I cooked it. Everything went pretty well, and then I went into the living room and sat in an office chair right in front of the TV and started playing on my PlayStation. This went on for several hours. At about 9 at night, I heard the sound of somebody stepping onto the front step where our door was. The living room was at the front of the house, so it really wasn't that far away. When I heard the person walk onto the front step, I assumed that it was my mom and brother returning from the birthday party. I kept playing, expecting to hear the door open at any point, but after several minutes went by, nothing happened. Nobody entered the house. I got curious and got up, walked over to the front door to look outside. When I did, I didn't see anybody there. There was no one at the front door, and my mom's car was not in the driveway either. As I was looking there, something caught my eye to the left. I looked and saw what appeared to be a man walking through the front yard. He was just barely in my sight for about a second before disappearing past what I could see. He had gone towards the side of the house, or maybe the neighbor's yard. I was a little nervous after this, but I assumed that the man had left. I didn't really know who he was or what he was doing. I kept watching around the front yard for a minute or so and saw nothing more. So after that, I returned to my video games. I couldn't help but be creeped out by what I had seen, so I was trying to take my mind off of it. After about 10 minutes, it was starting to work. That is, until suddenly I heard the sound of somebody trying to open the back door to the house. Our back door was connected to the kitchen and went out to the patio. This sound was much louder, and I instantly stood up. I ran over to the phone and called my mom's number. During this time, I didn't hear any more noises. I told my mom that somebody tried coming in the back door, and she told me to call the police. She told me that she would be home as soon as she could, but the birthday party was still going on. So after that, I quickly ran upstairs and then went into my bedroom. Once I was there, I called the police and told them that I thought somebody was trying to break in. After giving them my address, I went and hid behind my bed. I covered myself with tons of blankets. I was really too scared to want to know what was going on. As I waited for the police to arrive, I was hoping that the man had just left and not tried breaking in. I wasn't hearing anything, but then again, I was covered in blankets. It felt like forever, but maybe 10 minutes later, the police got there. I remember that I got a call on the phone and was told that they were there. I never would have gone down and left my bedroom on my own when that happened. I got up but heard people talking, so I stayed in my bedroom. I remember a while later there was a knock at my bedroom door. I was terrified until I heard a voice on the other side say, "Police." Then I answered the door and there was an officer there. He told me that they had caught a man who had just broken in. I was told that the police got there in the nick of time, and they really did. The man had somehow gotten the back door to the house open. He had literally just entered when the police arrived. The man was arrested and luckily didn't get far into the house. I was honestly shocked when I heard it, but luckily, everything turned out fine. He wasn't able to steal anything or do any damage. The back door needed a little bit of fixing, but it wasn't a huge deal. After that, though, I didn't want to stay home by myself for a long time. A couple of years ago, I lived alone in an apartment on the 4th floor of a pretty typical building. It had 5 floors total and was relatively old, close to the city. My apartment was 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom with a kitchen and a living room. It wasn't very big, but it had everything I needed for just myself. After about 3 or 4 months of living there, one night, I woke up in the middle of the night. I immediately heard some sounds, as if there was somebody else in my apartment. I thought I heard footsteps near the front door. I sat up and turned on my light, and the noises seemed to stop. I sat in bed for a while, gathering the courage to get up and open my bedroom door. Eventually, I did, and I looked out into my dark living room and kitchen. I turned on the lights, and everything seemed normal. I must have been hearing things or something. After checking around my apartment and making sure the door was still locked, I went back to bed. Nothing strange happened for about a month, but then almost the exact same thing occurred again. I was woken up in the night by noises inside my apartment. This time I lay in bed trying hard to listen and detect what exactly they were. The noises weren't very loud, but it sounded like somebody was walking inside my apartment. All of my lights were off, including in my bedroom, so I couldn't see anything. I thought about turning on the light, but I was focused on listening to the noise. Was there a chance I was hearing something other than what it sounded like? Maybe I was hearing someone on the floor above or below, or maybe it was just random noises that buildings make. But no, it was definitely the sound of someone walking around in my apartment, and now it sounded like the footsteps were right outside my bedroom door. Then I heard the door handle start to turn, followed by the creak of my door opening. My heart pounded, and I felt really hot and sweaty as the door opened. I looked directly at the opening. The door got about halfway open, and I saw the figure of a man standing in the doorway. He appeared to be looking right at me, but I couldn't make out any details in the dark, just that he was there. I was sitting up in my bed, and he stood there for maybe 10 seconds before I couldn't help but let out a scream. When I did, the man backed up and shut the door. I screamed like a crazy person for about a minute straight. Once I composed myself, I grabbed my phone and called the police. They arrived a while later, but by then whoever had been in my apartment was gone. There was no evidence left behind, no signs of forced entry. My door was still locked, and none of my windows were open. I was so puzzled, but all I could provide was a description of a tall man. It was around 2 in the morning when the police left. I barely slept for the rest of the night and worried that I was going insane. Over the next few days, things got a little back to normal, but I was still worried about a repeat of the incident. Then, an idea came to me. I went to the store and bought 2 things, a lock for my bedroom door and a motion-detecting security camera. It was a bit expensive, but I needed answers. I set up the camera inside my apartment facing the door and most of the kitchen area where I had heard the footsteps. I hid the camera as best as I could on my bookshelf and installed the lock on my bedroom door to feel safer while I slept. I set up the camera every night before bed, but for the longest time, nothing happened. I was relieved, but still a bit worried about the possibility of the intruder returning. About 3 weeks after the last incident, something happened. I was once again woken up by the sound of the door to my apartment opening. I heard footsteps, which were now really fast and much louder than before. They went straight towards my bedroom door. Whoever it was tried opening the door, but this time it was locked. They tried violently and quickly, turning the knob several more times before stopping. I screamed that I was calling the police, which caused whoever was there to walk back and straight out my door. As soon as they left, I got up, grabbed my camera, and went back into my bedroom. I locked the door again and watched the footage. The camera had recorded the entire event. When I played the video, I saw a man walking right into my apartment as if the front door wasn't even locked. When the man walked in, I recognized him. It was my next-door neighbor. I didn't know him well, but I knew his name was Jim. I had only briefly said hi to him once in the hallway. After seeing this, I called the police again. They arrived and remembered me from before. This time I had evidence to show them. When they watched the video, they went next door and confronted Jim. At first, he pretended to be asleep and claimed the police had woken him up. But when he was told there was video evidence, he seemed to get angry. He flat out denied it, but later changed his story, saying he must have been sleepwalking. The police were convinced and took him in. I was relieved they did, because he later admitted he had been awake the whole time and had managed to get into my apartment because he had a spare key. I'm still not sure how he had an extra key to my place, but I'm just glad I don't have to worry about him anymore. I was working late one night in my office, trying to finish writing a report that was due in a few days. I had some tea to help keep me energized, and was trying to get it all done as fast as possible. Staying up late was a regular thing I had to do for work, and it's always been difficult for me to maintain focus once I start getting tired. As I worked at my office, there was a knock at the front door. I got up and looked down the hallway. I didn't know why anyone would be at my door at this time. I walked down to the other end of the house and looked out the peephole, but nobody was outside on my porch. I took a step back and thought that it may have not actually been the front door. I was so focused on work and was on the opposite side of the house, so when I heard the light knocking sound, I just assumed it was someone at the door. I didn't know what else it could have been, but I just went back to my office and started working again. Maybe I should have been more worried about what the knock was, but I was so tired and wanting to get my work done that it wasn't even on my mind. After a few minutes, I stayed on the computer typing away for the better part of an hour. Nothing else seemed to happen as far as the knocking went, but I was getting exponentially more tired by the minute. My workflow was slowing and my eyes were getting heavy. Just when I was going to call it a night, I reached over for my tea, and right in the window across the room was a pair of eyes staring back at me. All I could tell from the moment was that it was a man, but he quickly ran away from the window after I saw him. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I just sat there with my eyes locked on the window. It was so unexpected, I was almost in a daze. After a moment, I stood up and ran over to cover the window. I didn't know who that was or why he was looking into my house like that, but it being almost midnight made it all the more terrifying. I left my office and went to the front of the house, looking out the peephole again to see if he'd gone to my front yard, but I didn't see him. I then went to a window on the back of the house and looked around, but again there was no one out there. My adrenaline was pumping and I was not tired at all anymore, but the now silence of the house was starting to freak me out. Did the man leave or was he still outside? I went back to my office and got my phone, then started making my way back to the front door. My plan was to call the cops while keeping my eyes on the doors and windows, but as I got to the end of the hallway, I was met by a large figure standing in the back of the living room. He was tall and wearing thick clothes to hide his identity, but his eyes were not the same as the ones I'd seen in the window. This was someone else. The man didn't hesitate, charging across the room at me. I turned and ran for my office, locking the door behind me and pressing my body against it, preparing for him to try kicking it down. As he approached the door, though, he slowed to a stop and just stood right outside of it. I could hear him breathing, then starting to walk back and forth like he was pacing in the hallway. But then I heard it again, a light knocking sound on the other side of the house. The man outside the door started to walk down the hallway back toward the living room. Then it was silent for a few minutes as I stayed there against the door. There was absolutely nothing. I called the cops, whispering into my phone and begging them to come quickly. I waited for about 5 minutes before I heard the sirens approaching my house. As they unlocked my front door and came in, there were no altercations. I heard them walk through the house and finally up to my door, and they never saw either of the men. To this day, I still don't know how the one man got in or what the two of them were trying to do. I think the knocking was their way of communicating from inside and outside the house. But then that makes me question what the first knock was that I heard. The whole situation freaks me out every time I think about it, wondering how long the one had been watching me for, and how long the other man had been inside my house. It could have ended up so much worse for me, so I know I got lucky. But it's hard not to think about the possibility of them coming back, and luck isn't what I want to rely on for my safety.